Hey everyone, this is Libertarian Black Man. I hope that every single American can agree with this, that we should dump the U.S. tax code. Everyone who pays taxes understands the burden of what they have to deal with when it comes to taxation and the U.S. government. One of them is that it is expensive, not just in paying taxes, but also in attempting to stay in good standing with the IRS by making sure that you have fully complied and fully done an assessment of all of your wealth, income, and assets to the government so that they cannot accuse you of tax evasion. The income tax code is so complicated that Americans back in 2016, according to the Tax Foundation, had to spend almost 9 billion hours just in that 1 year complying with the tax code. That's time that could have been spent doing other more productive things in the economy. But because the taxes have to be paid and the tax code is so complicated that no one understands it, we have to spend lots of time. And it's the professionals who spend the time because almost no one does their own taxes. They have to hire professionals or purchase software or computer programs to help them figure out their taxes. So this comes out to not just almost 9 billion hours, but over $400 billion in compliance costs. These are resources that are lost from the rest of the economy as a result of making our tax code too complicated for the average American to do, and as a result we have to spend money and time with other types of technologies and other industries that do taxes in order to make sure that we are in good standing with the IRS, because if we're not, they'll come after us. They'll take our home, they'll take our income, they can garnish wages. They can put us in jail if we evade taxes. So it's very important, which is why we spend so much time and money complying with the tax code, because if we don't, we'll be in serious trouble. Another reason that we should dump the U.S. tax code is that it is inefficient when it comes to collecting taxes. Back in 2016, the same year that we were spending 9 billion hours and over $400 billion paying taxes, we lost nearly $500 billion in unpaid annual taxes because the income tax code requires us to declare income and assets so that the government can get its piece. If we don't do that, and of course Americans all around the country don't do that every year, that is revenue that is lost. Now, as you know, I am not someone who believes the government should have more money. They should have less, far less money. But the problem with the tax code that loses so much money is that tax collection ends up not being enough for those people who want to collect taxes, and that drives them to want to increase tax rates. It is like having the defeat of your own solution built into it, where you want to collect more money, but because you have an inefficient way of collecting, you collect less, and then you want to grab even more money by raising tax rates because you've already lost so much money as a result of an inefficient technique of collecting taxes. A much better way to go about it would be a sales tax, which is paid whenever you buy something. You purchase a good, a service, a product, and you pay the tax right there because it's built into the price. That's the way it used to be in America, and tax collection was much more efficient. Tax evasion was something that you were not going to be guilty of if you bought something. You would only be guilty of it as a corporation if you chose not to kick back to the government. But this was something you couldn't really get away with. Tax evasion is the result of an income tax code that allows for people to decide whether or not they're going to give the government access to their wealth. And of course, people choose not to do that. So we have a very bad, inefficient way of collecting taxes with an income tax code. The worst thing about the income tax is that it is unfair. Those who have the most wealth, unfortunately, are making out with the best in tax benefits, ultimately paying nothing in taxes, even though they are taxed at a higher rate, and sometimes making out with a subsidy from the federal government, while everyone else has no subsidy and must pay a certain percentage of their income to the government. A perfect example of this is with corporations. They are known for paying a tax rate far lower than what they're taxed at. The corporate tax rate in 2019 is 21%, but we have 24 corporations that I'm about to show you that are not only paying 0%, but they're actually paying lower than 0. They're getting negative tax rates. They're being subsidized by the taxpayer while paying nothing. One example is Amazon. Last year, in 2018, they made over $10 billion. These numbers here are in millions of dollars. So Amazon made $10,835 million, or $10.8 billion. The taxes that they paid was $129 million, but there's a minus sign here, which means that in fact what they paid was nothing, and they got back from the federal government $129 million, making $10.8 billion, paying 0, and then getting an extra $129 million. That's a tax rate of negative 1%. Every one of these corporations that you see here paid negative tax rates. Delta Airlines, Chevron, General Motors, and all of these corporations here all paid negative tax rates ranging from minus 1% to minus 24% for Prudential Financial. Negative 24%. The two corporations highlighted here made out the best last year. AECOM Technology made $238 million, paid 0 taxes, and got a subsidy from the taxpayer because they qualified for so many tax deductions of $122 million, a negative tax rate of 51%. IBM made $500 million, paid 0 taxes, and got a subsidy of $342 million. That's a negative tax rate of 68%. It is the tax deductions that corporations have for doing different things, for research and development, for offshoring operations, for having solar panels be installed at the work site, for hiring military veterans, for doing all kinds of things. There are literally thousands of ways that you can qualify for a tax rebate, and corporations have so many that they're paying nothing and getting subsidies from the federal government. I don't know of any individual who can say, hey, I'm earning $60,000 or $80,000 a year, and I didn't pay any taxes. Oh, and by the way, I got back a subsidy that was the equivalent of more than half of what I earned. No person in America can say that, but the corporations can say that because that is how our income tax code is built. This is corporate welfare at its worst, and it should be stopped today. Over the course of the 20th and 21st century, the income tax code has evolved, not just in the tax rates, but also in the complexity of the tax code. In 1913, when the income tax was brand new, we had 7 tax rates, each in the single digits, the lowest being 1%, the highest being 7% for the wealthiest individuals. Fast forward to 2019, and you'll see that every tax rate has moved into the double digits, the lowest being 10%, the highest being 37%. back in 2017, at the end of the year, there was a tax cut bill in which the Republicans drew up and the president signed. That cut a few of the tax rates down only by a few percentage points, but it didn't really change the amount of taxation that people were getting. People were still paying double-digit tax rates, and the reason is because the government is now expected to do far more than it was back in 1913, and we have a deficit situation that Republicans were afraid of blowing up, so they did not want to cut taxes further. But the bottom line is we have gone from single-digit tax rates at every single tax level to double-digit tax rates at every single tax level. The corporate income tax rate back in 1909, when it was first introduced, was only 1%. Today, 21%. And that's a cut from 35% where it was back in 2017. So we cut the corporate tax rate in half, but yet we can't go anywhere near where we used to because we have such a big government. And big governments demand income taxes. If we're going to cut or get rid of the income tax, which is what I want us to do, then we have to also get rid of most of our government. As far as what the government is paying for, we have to bring it back to the private sector and let private individuals take care of the responsibilities that government has been assigned to do for now. The U.S. tax code was 400 pages in 1913, and 2019, over 74,000 pages. This is why we have to spend so much time and money complying, because in those 74,000 pages are all kinds of rules and regulations for what we owe and how we can get a deduction and a rebate and when something has to be paid. No one can understand it. I think that the tax code has gotten to be over 9 million words now. It's the equivalent of 10 Bibles if you stack them all together. No one can tell you exactly what it all says. So we have to spend so much time and money trying to figure it out. It is a tax in and of itself just to comply with the tax code on top of paying the money into the government. This should be a top issue in the 2020 election. If I were a Democrat or Republican or an independent or anyone else running for office, I would say that one thing we can all agree on is that the tax code is too complex, it's inefficient, and it is unfair because it gives those who have the most wealth the greatest opportunity to evade taxation legally, while the rest of us will go to jail or lose money and wealth if we attempt to evade taxation to the degree that is legally allowed by the wealthiest corporations and individuals. Why no one is saying this or making the income tax a top priority in this election is beyond me. But this is something people need to vote on. If someone that you are considering voting for does not address the U.S. tax code's complexity and unfairness and inefficientness, then do not vote for them, because it will not change. It will not get better for you unless your vote depends on who addresses this issue. A year ago, I published a book titled Say No to Big Government, My Case for Maximum Freedom. I talk about taxation, I talk about big government and how it is hurting this country, and how we can get back to a nation where this economy grows again, where we have less income inequality, more prosperity, more of what made this nation the greatest in history, coming from being as poor as any other to being a world superpower. We have to make the government small again. We have to get rid of these things like the income tax code that are nothing more than an anvil on economic prosperity. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please follow us on Twitter at Libertarian Black Man, and we hope to see you in the next video.